can you explain, like, how are you owned by them, or what is the relationship?
Yeah, so we're not owned by them at all. Binance.com doesn't own a single share of Binance US. We share a common founder, and historically, Binance US licensed the name and some technology from Binance.com. The way to think about it really is that a couple of years ago, it was clear that the world was segmenting into two basic kinds of markets. You had most of the world, which was still learning about crypto, didn't have crypto licenses or requirements. And then you had an emerging part of the developed world that started putting crypto within a regulatory framework. We were founded precisely to be a regulatorily compliant licensed exchange. So we've got 43 US states that allow us to trade in their borders based on licenses and other legal compliance mechanisms that we have. We'll eventually have all 50 state licenses. And then, of course, there are other parts of the world served by a different company. But other than licensing the name and licensing the technology, we operate independently. We have a separate board of directors. We have a separate ownership. And, you might think about us as essentially a Binance branded exchange that's doing our own business here. They're the biggest in the world. We're the 8th biggest in the world. Different companies.
All right. So we got the brand here in the U.S. Now, Brian. When we talk about the U.S. regulation or lack of it, and I'm curious as to your thoughts as to why it's been so slow to see something a little bit more formative out of the SEC and the other regulators here, whether it's setting up guardrails, whether it's approving ETFs. There just doesn't seem to be any real momentum, at least not I can see publicly.
But Romain, that is a great comment. And I think, honestly, it says more about the U.S. regulatory system than it says about crypto, to be honest. Part of it is, in this country, we set up a lot of different regulators and gave them each their share of turf. So the issue is, and I know this having run one of these agencies, there's a little bit of inherent turf conflict between, the Fed and the OCC, or the SEC and the CFTC. Everybody's trying to grab a little bit of turf, and because of that, it's hard to get clarity. If you look at a country like the United Kingdom, where there's basically a single regulator for the entire financial system, that's the Financial Conduct Authority, it's a lot easier to get clarity. Over here, you've got competition among agencies, there's overlap in their jurisdiction, and so at some level, it's tough to deal with. But I will say, we're not as far behind as people might think. I mean, at the end of the last administration, all of the major regulators, myself included, got together through the president's working group on financial markets and started providing some clarity on certain crypto assets like stablecoins. And I think that's an example of how our regulatory system can adapt if all the regulators work together. But I will say, we're not as far behind as people might think. Look,
I'm glad the president's meeting with his regulators because, this space has needed attention for some time. Frankly, we're talking crypto especially, but the whole state of financial regulation is having a hard time keeping up with the fintech, innovation that is, moving much faster than regulators can. So I think one of the big things that he has to talk about is how do we do, federal policy that makes it clear what is a security and what is not. That's GENSLER with the SEC. You have XRP, for example, is a cryptocurrency that could be very useful for the payment system. But Ripple, how separate and distinct is that as an entity? And if they exercise a lot of control over it, it might look a lot like a security. But if there truly is a firewall there, it might look like it's not a security. And we've tried for a long time to get a bright line test there to make it so it's less subjective for regulators. And, one of the encouraging things is GENSLER really understands that. He taught blockchain courses at MIT prior to taking this current role. So it's good that he has some expertise there, and hopefully he'll listen and have good dialogue.
The primary marketplace, initial coin offerings. There was a technologist, J.R. Willett, back in 2012, and he said, you could build something on top of Bitcoin, and you could pre-fund, and you could get people just to crowd fund a project. And what came to be raised off of J.R. Willett's little innovation, he by the way did not get rich on it, $20 to $30 billion were raised. And my observation is in some jurisdictions like the U.S., we find ourselves thinking about things like the Howey test and what is an investment contract, because this new permissionless crowdfunding sure feels like a security. What advice would you have for this audience and for the thousands of people who are, in some cases, feeling that they're waiting for the SEC to give more clarity in this world? Well, I find myself agreeing with Chairman Clayton. Hester's colleague who runs the commission, when he says he really hasn't seen many initial coin offerings that are not securities. I can't remember the exact words, but he said it, and he said it so many times in variation. Are you kind of, in a sense, conceptually where he is, or particularly if it's pre-functional? If it is not yet up and running, I frankly can't see how it would be anything other than an investment contract if it is yet to be functional.
Well, but if you're selling tokens to someone who wants to have those tokens because the person wants to participate in that network, why would that necessarily have to be a security?
Because I think you're, back to the Howey test, relying on the efforts of a common enterprise, a development team that for almost all altcoins is 2 to 6 developers or some computer folks working on it. They may or may not be at one company, but it's a common enterprise of others, and you're buying it at some discount. You're anticipating appreciation because if it's non-functional, I can't use it yet to go to the theater, I can't use it yet to get file storage, I can't use it for anything. Almost by economic rationale, it will be at a discount.
Well, I mean, I think this is why it's a really difficult question, because sometimes these networks really do count on the activities of many people, right? So that's one feature. And the other is there are lots of things, like I might buy a watch now, knowing that it's going to appreciate in value. So
but hopefully you can tell the time on the watch now.
You hope, right? But it might be sitting in a drawer because really what I care about is that it's appreciating in value and I don't want to get it scratched in the meantime, right? And so I do think that we've seen lots of ICOs that are securities offerings, but I'm not willing to make the blanket statement that there's no way that you could set up a pre-functional network and sell tokens on it and not have it be a securities offering. That said, I think if you're planning to do that, you're planning to sell tokens on a pre-functional network, you better be very careful and you better get very good legal advice, because it's going to be very easy for you to tip into the securities bucket.
And I guess maybe you'd agree with me, once it's functional, it may or may not be a security. It doesn't mean if it's functional, it is always not a security.
Xcurrent is the thing that they're using most right now, and that's just an alternative for Swift that doesn't even use their coin.
So Hugo has asked about the token XRP and whether I think it's a non-compliant security. I've spoken publicly. Yes, I do think it's a non-compliant security. But this will not be resolved just by the Securities and Exchange Commission. It will be resolved by some courts, whether it's appellate courts or the Supreme Court. So what I believe is just that, it's a belief. But why would I say that? I think back to the Howey test. I think they are exchanging XRP. Ripple, the company, is exchanging XRP for something of value. And they're using it right now. They sell it every month. It's in a lockup, it's in an escrow, and they sell XRP every month. Ripple, the company, initially did the Genesis block back in 2013, but kept 80% of the tokens. Now they have about 60% of the token.
It's an investment asset class. It's not one for the faint of heart, but that doesn't undermine the fundamental value proposition that crypto presents, which is a total revolution in the way we think about transfers of value, and we think about the way in which society identifies things of value in a new digital age.
So I gotta go here, but if I'm reading right, the ultimate message is that crypto is here to stay, particularly the bigger names like the Bitcoins of the world, and people, they ride it out, it'll be worth the ride. These ups and downs, it's going to ultimately be worth the ride, and not even the power of giant countries and protecting their fiat currency will stop this. That's what I'm hearing.
And the proof of that, Charles, is the amount of institutional interest that's moving into this asset class, even now at the reduced price from a few months ago.
The Honorable Giancarlo. Thank you so